Hey guys, tonight we time travel to a world where music doesn't soothe, it drones, echoes, and gets stuck in your head like a Gregorian chant you can't unhear. You're standing in the middle of a medieval stone chapel. It's cold, damp. You can feel the chill sneaking up through the soles of your feet. The walls breathe out centuries of incense and limestone, and above you, a narrow window bleeds in gray daylight. No instruments, no melody, just voices, layered, looped, liturgical. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background tone. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit on a hard bench. It creaks beneath you, almost louder than the chanting. Around you, robed monks sway like underwater kelp, lips barely moving as they intone the divine Office 8 services round the clock every single day. Right now, it's matins, or maybe lauds, hard to tell. The music, if you can call it, that has no rhythm, no beat, no harmony in the way you know it. This is plainchant, also called Gregorian chant. Technically, it's sacred monophony 1, unaccompanied melodic line floating in a space where time loses traction. You try to hum along, but it loops back on itself like a snake biting its tail. You lose track of where the phrase ends or begins. Welcome to musical limbo. Even the monks seem a little dazed, and they do this all day, every day, for life. No pressure. In theory, this chant is meant to bring you closer to God. In practice, it might be giving you a slow-motion brain cramp. You squint at the chant book, no bar lines, no notation like you'd recognize. Just square Noom's ancient squiggles, floating over 4 lines instead of 5. Reading this feels like trying to solve a crossword puzzle during an earthquake. Your brain, attuned to catchy choruses and dramatic key changes, starts to protest. The repetition, the lack of climax, the way everything floats in the same solemn gear. Even monks got bored, which is probably why they invented Tropes musical add-ons to spice things up. Some were reverent, others not so much. Historians still argue whether certain tropes were pious elaborations or cheeky, passive-aggressive additions by monks who'd had one too many vigils. Meanwhile, your spine stiffens from the stone-cold bench, but the chanting doesn't stop. It weaves on past the edges of your awareness. You start hearing phantom harmonies that aren't there. Just your brain trying to add something, anything, to make it feel finished. One monk stares right at you, not rudely, just knowingly, like he's seen this face before. The "what have I gotten myself into" face. He hands you a candle. You take it because it feels like something to do. Then he keeps chanting. The acoustic in the chapel is working against you too. Every sound ricochets off the bare stone walls, multiplying like ghosts. You shift your weight, and your cough echoes for days. At some point, someone hits a low note so deep it vibrates your sternum. You're not sure if it's supposed to feel this intense. And yet, there's beauty here too, if you squint your ears. The chants unfold like parchment, patient and slow. No one's rushing to get to the chorus. There is no chorus. One fringe theory says Gregorian chant wasn't really meant for human ears, but to imitate the music of the spheres, a mystical harmony produced by the planets themselves. Ancient philosophers imagined the heavens as a kind of cosmic harp. Your body, apparently, is the poor cello getting rattled by Saturn's bad mood. Eventually, your eyes droop. Not from peace, more from mental exhaustion. It's like trying to meditate next to a dripping faucet, or watching someone stir soup for 4 hours. And yet somehow, you're still intrigued. A fly buzzes past. Even it seems disoriented by the lack of rhythm. You swear it almost syncs with the chant, then veers off as if offended. Suddenly, something shifts. The voices split. A high note joins the line, then a lower one. Harmony? Kind of. 2 notes, then 3. You've stumbled into organum, an early experiment in harmony. The rules are strict, though. Only certain intervals are allowed, mostly perfect fourths and fifths. Anything else is dangerous, tempting, sinful even. But we'll get to that. For now, your head swims as the chant thickens. Still no beat, still no instruments. But something about the added voices makes it feel almost alive, like vines growing around an ancient ruin. You glance at the candle in your hand. It's melted into a stub. Have hours passed? Or days? One monk leans forward and mouths something. You can't hear him over the resonance, but you're pretty sure he said, "This is just the beginning." The chanting hasn't stopped. It probably never does. But the sound has changed, grown, split into layers like old waterlogged parchment peeling at the edges. As the monks shift into a new mode, yes mode, not key, you feel the ground tilt. This isn't a normal musical scale. This is one of the medieval church modes, with names like Dorian, Phrygian, and Mixolydian. They sound like sorcerers, and honestly, they might as well be. You step outside the chapel, blinking into a pale afternoon. The air is cool and still carries a faint hum from inside, like your ears are ringing with holiness or confusion, maybe both. You wander toward a nearby scriptorium, where a thin man in ink-stained robes mutters to himself over a parchment. He's writing music, but not the kind you just heard. This is experimental, secretive, and a little bit dangerous. He sees you and beckons. "Listen to this," he says, placing a small harp in your lap. The strings are out of tune. You pluck a few notes harmless enough until he points to a particular interval. "Now play that," he says, and you do. It's wrong. Immediately wrong. The hair on your neck rises. The sound wobbles between notes like it's not supposed to exist. He nods. That's the diabolus in musica, the devil's interval. It's a tritone, 3 whole steps between notes. In modern music, it's everywhere. Rock, jazz, film scores. But in the Middle Ages, absolutely not. It was dissonant, unstable. Medieval theorists warned against it like it was a cursed relic. Some believed it summoned impure thoughts. Others believed it summoned actual demons. Historians still argue whether anyone was ever punished for writing it, but you can bet no monk was composing with it in plain sight. You pluck it again, softer this time. It still sounds like something's trying to crawl out of the harp. The scribe chuckles. Some said it opened portals, not to hell, to something worse. He doesn't elaborate, which is somehow worse than elaborating. You glance at his sheet music. It's rigid and geometric. Music wasn't just expressive, it was math. Ratios, fractions. The medieval mind saw harmony as a reflection of divine order. That's why a tritone felt like betrayal, like dropping ink on a sacred page. In the background, 2 young students argue over a theorist named Boethius, who believed music had 3 kinds: Musica Mondana, Musica Humana, and Musica Instrumentalis. Only the last one made noise. The first two? Just ... vibes. One boy insists the tritone ruins the body's harmony. The other shrugs and says it just sounds cool. You smile. Some debates never die. But here's a fun wrinkle. Despite the fear, the Devil's Interval did sneak into medieval music. Carefully, secretly. A few daring composers, like the folks working at Notre Dame, dipped their toes into the dark pool. They didn't call it a tritone, of course. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they masked it in ornamentation or used it to heighten tension in dramatic chants. Was it rebellion? Or just an accident? Scholars are still debating, but you're starting to suspect these so-called holy men were also deeply bored. The scribe invites you to test another interval, a perfect fifth. It resonates cleanly, comforting. God lives in the fifth, he says, nodding solemnly. The devil hides in the half step. You're beginning to notice that, in medieval music, everything had theological baggage. Instruments weren't neutral tools, they had reputations. Intervals had personalities. Even musical directions mattered. Upward motion suggested heaven. Downward meant despair. If you composed something that descended too often, people got nervous. You head down a spiral stair into a small crypt, where a group of singers are rehearsing a new piece. This one has tension, movement. It doesn't just float, it climbs. And suddenly, there it is again. That crooked, teeth-grinding tritone. A single voice brushes against it, then veers away like it touched fire. Someone nearby crosses themselves. You sit beside the wall and press your ear to the cool stone. You can still hear the music. It's fighting itself, struggling to remain holy. Every melody seemed to risk stepping into the forbiddens. And here's the twist. Medieval music wasn't written for your comfort. It wasn't for dancing. It wasn't for playlists. It was written for God. And God, apparently, had very specific taste. A stray cat brushes your leg. It hisses as the singers try the tritone again. You decide not to take that personally. Later, you climb back up into the light, where a bell tolls from the chapel. Its overtones ripple into the sky like metal waves. You realize even bells had rules. They were tuned to specific pitches to reinforce divine order. A badly tuned bell wasn't just unpleasant, it was spiritually dangerous. By now, you're wondering how anyone enjoyed music in this time. And the truth is, maybe they didn't. Not in the way we do. Medieval music wasn't about fun. It was about structure, sacredness, staying within the lines, even when those lines were drawn by men in robes with shaky ink hands. But every once in a while, someone broke the rules. Hit the wrong interval. Let dissonance linger. And when that happened, the music got interesting. Not beautiful, necessarily, but alive. You leave the stone corridors behind, shaking off the lingering echo of that haunted tritone. Outside, the wind has changed. Gone is the hush of sacred stone and murmured Latin. Now it's market day. You wander into a medieval town's square, narrow streets packed with people. Muddy cobbles, hawkers shouting, chickens committing petty crimes. The air smells like baked rye bread, sweat, and faintly fermented onions. You're jostled left and right, then, wait, is that music? Yes, but not the kind that makes you smile. It's sharp nasal, a bit screechy played on a shawl. A medieval double reed instrument that sounds like a goose having an existential crisis. A man in bright colors blasts out a tune while spinning in circles, and children scream in delight or fear. It's hard to tell. This is secular music, and it lives outside the cloister. But don't assume it's all fun and games, because while you tap your foot, something eerie starts to creep in. You realize this song isn't about love or harvests or heroic nights. It's about a neighbor named Elise who allegedly stole 3 eggs and lied to the miller about it. The tune repeats her name over and over. Elise the egg thief, it says, like a medieval diss track on loop. You look around. People are nodding, listening, learning. The music is doing something more than entertaining. It's informing, shaming, controlling. In the medieval world, music could be a form of surveillance. The town crier and the wandering minstrel both served the same function. Public opinion management. You couldn't scroll. You had to listen. And once your name was in a song, it stuck. Probably forever. Suntowns hired musicians not just to perform, but to spy. Singers moved freely between manors, markets, and monasteries. They heard everything: gossip, politics, scandal. And if they were clever, they slipped it into a catchy melody that everyone would hum by sundown. Historians still argue whether this counted as proto-journalism or state-sponsored shade. You pass a stall where a blind hurdy-gurdy player grinds out a low, droning ballad. It's a dirge about a local noble who fell from his horse into a lake full of leeches. The lyrics are graphic. The rhythm is slow, and the crowd is eating it up like a tragic soap opera. You try to hum along, but it's impossible. The tune bends in strange places, and you swear it skips a beat every other line. Is that on purpose? Or is the hurdy-gurdy broken? No one seems to care. Next, you notice an oddly calm man in a blue cloak standing very still by a well. He's not begging, not dancing, just watching. At his hip, a small bagpipe quiet for now, but his eyes move from face to face, registering expressions. You wonder if he's taking notes, musical ones. Later, you hear a different kind of performance, this one inside a tavern. A woman sings with her back to the wall, voice soft, and the men lean in like they're trying to remember something they never knew. The melody is older than the building. The lyrics, too, about a war no one remembers. A hero who might have been made up, but everyone sings the chorus. Because here's the thing, medieval music was a memory device. You couldn't read? No problem. You'd remember that tune. Your taxes are changing? Here's a rhyme. The king just banned turnips? There's a jig for that. It was propaganda, education, gossip, all wrapped in catchy rhythms and weird intervals. You pause near a group of students drinking from shared mugs. One of them recites a Latin hymn, then swaps out the words for jokes in French. The others gasp and laugh. Welcome to Contrafactum, the medieval remix. Take a sacred melody, swap in new lyrics, and you've got yourself a hit. Sometimes it was harmless fun. Sometimes it was political subversion. A few monks did it too, which is probably why so many were banned from taverns. Of course, the church didn't love this. Secular tunes were messy. They invited dancing, laughter, opinion. Worst of all, they traveled. A tune sung in Paris might be mocking the Bishop of York by the time it got there. And with no internet, no record deals, no copyright lawyers, there was no way to stop it. One fringe theory claims that some kings used musicians as spies, not because they were loyal, but because they were everywhere, and songs couldn't be unread. You sit down on a barrel, and the man next to you starts humming. It's a melody you heard back in the chapel, but it's different now. Faster, earthier. It's changed form, like a chant that took off its robe and put on dancing shoes. The lines between sacred and secular blur fast in the medieval ear. A holy hymn becomes a harvest song. A drinking tune slips into a wedding mass. No one's quite sure where the original came from, or if it even matters anymore. A bell rings somewhere down the street, and the music vanishes like a dream when you try to retell it. The sham player stops mid-squawk. People scatter. You glance toward the sound. A procession. Priests. Crosses. More chants. And just like that, the fun is over. For now. The chant fades behind you like a door gently closing, and you find yourself pulled into the muffled chaos of a tavern. Warm, smoke-filled, and far too crowded for comfort, the place buzzes with drink and motion. Tankards clink, dice rattle, someone belches near the hearth, and over it all, the unmistakable scrape of string and thump of drum. This time, you brace yourself. You've already learned medieval music doesn't care about your modern expectations. But even so, nothing prepares you for the rhythm. You try to nod along. 1, 2, 1, 2, nope. That's 3. Then 5. Wait, did that just loop back halfway through a line? A tavern band is halfway into what appears to be a dance tune. A rebec, a kind of early fiddle, is leading the charge with manic energy, accompanied by a drum that's clearly just doing its best. The tempo lurches unpredictably, and the melody zigzags like a drunk moth circling a torch. You try to tap your foot to it and fail spectacularly. Across the room, a group of locals are actually dancing to this, or attempting to. Their movements are less choreographed and more controlled stumble. Still, there's a rhythm, just not one you understand. And that's because medieval rhythm didn't follow the time signatures, you know. No 4/4 beats or neatly sliced measures. Instead, it used modes not just in melody, but in rhythm. Think of them like personality templates for beats. Trochaic, iambic, dactylic, yes, like poetry. Music and verse were basically siblings back then. But good luck finding a consistent downbeat. The locals don't seem to mind. They move with a sort of joyful chaos, like they've accepted that the tune might betray them at any moment. And it often does. Rhythms drop. Phrases extend awkwardly. Sometimes it just ends. One man falls flat on his face mid-spin. No one helps him up. It might be part of the dance. You wander toward the musicians, hoping for clarity. The rebec player winks at you and plays a series of notes that seem to skip a step between octaves, landing somewhere between mischief and wrong answer on a game show. He grins. We don't write him down. We just pass him around. This is an oral tradition at work. No sheet music. Just memory. Embellishment, muscle memory, and communal chaos. Some songs changed slightly each time they were played. Others mutated entirely, depending on who was playing them and what they'd had to drink. Historians still argue whether this inconsistency was intentional creativity or just a lot of people playing badly in unison. You move to a side room where a quieter group is trying to rehearse something more structured, a stately dance. The pavan, maybe, slow, measured. Except one player keeps adding little flourishes, extra notes, weird syncopations, flatted tones that raise eyebrows. Stop ornamenting, someone snaps. I'm not. The player protests. That's how my uncle taught it. And there it is again, the medieval music paradox. No single version, no agreed rhythm. You might think you're playing it wrong, but someone else might swear you're playing it exactly right, because that's how they learned it. Even rhythm notation, when written down, was weirdly ambiguous. Early medieval scores used ligature's tiny squiggles that suggested rhythm, but didn't specify it. Like a recipe that says, cook until done. Not super helpful. You peek over one scribe's shoulder at a piece of mentral notation, a later attempt at rhythmic accuracy. It uses note shapes to suggest duration. It looks like a bunch of black diamonds and rectangles standing in formation. Still confusing, but at least it admits music can be counted. Outside, the dancing spills into the street. Someone's banging a tabor with a stick in one hand and swinging a pipe in the other. Yes, a pipe he's playing melody and percussion at the same time. You don't know whether to be impressed or concerned. You try again to follow the beat. Just when you think you've got it, they switch modes. Suddenly, the rhythm is in triple time, then duple, then both. A fringe theory suggests medieval musicians intentionally played with polymeter 2 rhythms at once, not out of sophistication, but because no one told them not to. The result? Glorious, glorious rhythmic bedlam. At one point, someone claps along, offbeat, and the entire ensemble adjusts around them. They just roll with it. Rhythm is democratic here, and slightly drunk. You're offered a tambourine. You politely decline. The woman beside you snatches it up and immediately starts playing what might be a completely different song. No one stops her. They join in. You spot a man dancing in a circle, muttering numbers under his breath. 7, 8, 12. And he trips on his own foot. You help him up. He grins, teeth missing, and says, "Medieval rhythm, eh? She's a cruel mistress." Later, someone tries to lead a formal line dance, a Brenzel. You're pulled in against your will. The instructions are vague. Step, turn, jump if you feel like it, don't fall over. There's a whistle blast, and suddenly everyone moves left while you go right. Again, this seems acceptable. You hear someone yell, "Just follow the shoes." You follow the shoes. They don't help. The music speeds up, then slows down, then, inexplicably, stops mid-phrase. Silence. Everyone freezes. No resolution. No neat ending. The dance is done. Or someone forgot the last bar. Either way, you're starting to realize something important. Medieval rhythm didn't exist to keep dancers in sync. It existed to keep dancers awake, on edge, engaged, and possibly just slightly confused. And you're finally starting to get the hang of it. Sort of. You awaken probably from a brief blackout caused by rhythmic whiplash in a different room entirely. This one's quieter, though still far from peaceful. You found yourself inside a noble court. No chickens, no spilled ale. Just expensive tapestries, stiff wooden chairs, and music so bizarre it makes the tavern sound like top 40 radio. In the corner, 3 musicians tune their instruments. You recognize none of them. One looks like a lute that is mated with a giant spoon. Another resembles a harp missing half its strings. The third? Honestly, you think it's just a shell with horsehair stretched across it. A courtier whispers, "That's the truth." Very refined. You nod respectfully at the ancient spaghetti bowl. The ensemble begins to play. The sound is thin and nasal, yet somehow piercing. Like someone singing through a rolled-up scroll. The melody quivers, half sweet, half nervous. The rhythm, for once, isn't chaos, but the instruments? They sound like animals trying to negotiate. Let's meet the band. First, the rebec again held under the chin like a fiddle, but bowed with a curved stick that looks like it was found in a hedge. It's made of carved wood and gut strings. The gut, by the way, is sheep, or cows, or possibly human. The history's unclear, and frankly, the vibe supports all three. Next, the lute. It's the closest thing to a modern guitar, except the tuning is aggressively unhelpful. Historians still argue whether medieval lutes followed any consistent string logic, or if every player just said, close enough. Then there's the organistrum, a massive, crank-powered hurdy-gurdy played by two people. One turns the wheel, while the other presses wooden keys. It drones continuously, like a bagpipe stuck in a wind tunnel. Scholars believe it was used for spiritual purposes. You suspect it also doubled as medieval birth control. And yes, the bagpipes. Multiple pipes. One melody, one drone, one wild guess. The sound is instantly familiar and instantly regrettable. Loud, unapologetic. It's said they were used during battles to terrify the enemy. It's unclear if that was from intimidation or sheer volume. A knight nearby winces. They once played those during my wedding, he mutters, staring into the middle distance. My horse fled. You move on to more delicate sounds. The psaltery, plucked with fingertips. The dulcimer, harrowed gently with tiny mallets. And the viella proto-violin, whose tone is emphatically mournful. One historian called it the sound of a candle weeping. Another called it a wet cat in a drawer. Then you notice the serpent. Not an actual snake, but a wind instrument that looks like one curved, dark, and leathery. Its notes are deep and unpredictable. A fringe theory claims it was used to represent the voice of Satan in mystery plays. You believe it. When someone blows into it, the room vibrates like it's remembering a sin. One noble woman lifts a small pipe and begins to play a light tune. It's called a gemshern made from the actual horn of a goat. The sound? Airy, soft, slightly judgmental. You admire her for making that much emotion out of livestock. Here's the wild part. None of these instruments were standardized. No two looked quite the same. One lute might have 6 strings, another 10. One drum used goatskin, another pig. And tuning, that was? Let's call it intuitive. Musicians would tune to each other, not to a fixed pitch. If you played too high, they brought you down. If you played too low, they nodded solemnly and called it earthy. No tuning forks, no pitch pipes, just vibes. You settle beside a harpist who's plucking a scale that feels mathematically unstable. Is that C major? You ask. She laughs in your face. There is no C major, not yet. She's right. Major and minor keys, as we know them, didn't fully emerge until centuries later. Back here, it's all modes, baby. 7 of them, each with its own mood. Hypodorian, Mixolydian names that sound like prescription medications, and might as well be. Suddenly, a hush falls. A courtly composer enters, clutching a scroll and humming. You hear whispers. He's working on a motet. Motets are musical Frankenstein monsters. Multiple vocal lines layered on top of one another, often with different lyrics. In different languages, sung simultaneously. You hear one line in Latin, another in French. A third sounds suspiciously like someone complaining about taxes. Historians still argue whether this layering was profound or just deeply annoying. The performance begins. It's disorienting, like trying to read 3 books at once, out loud, with one eye closed. But slowly, your ears adjust. You begin to hear the patterns, the math beneath the madness. It's chaotic, but not random, like a puzzle solving itself. One courtier wipes a tear. Another is clearly asleep. Instruments fade in and out behind the voices, weaving ghost-like beneath the words. You recognize the rebec again. The serpent growls softly. The bagpipe hums, trying not to interrupt. And here, finally, is the core contradiction of medieval instruments. They're both clumsy and transcendent. They require effort, cooperation, tuning on the fly. Yet when they click, it's like hearing a language you forgot you knew. As the motet ends, the room exhales. Someone drops a goblet. A dog barks. Life returns. But that sound ... it lingers. Even the lute, with all its chaos, sounded briefly holy. You don't know how you got here. One moment, you're lost in a noble's motet, and the next, you're walking through a forest at dusk. Except this forest doesn't seem entirely real. The trees hum. The breeze moves in syncopation. There's a sound following you, constant, low, and entirely unnatural. You follow it until you reach a clearing. At the center stands a stone abbey. The door opens before you knock. Inside, a single monk is singing. Just one voice, just one note. And yet, it never stops. It pulses through the stone like it's part of the architecture. You recognize this now? It's tenor, the held note, the anchor of early polyphony. But it's not being held for a few measures. It's been going for a while. The monk nods to you without breaking the tone. Another monk joins, then a third. They layer their voices carefully, building around the drone. It's not harmony the way you expect. It's something older, stranger, like weaving threads through a loom. You sit quietly as they sing what seems to be an isorhythmic motet, a structure built on repeating rhythmic patterns, overlaid on melodic ones that don't match. Imagine 2 clocks ticking at different speeds, but meeting every now and then. It feels eternal, like musical déjà vu. There's a small flickering candle near your hand. You stare at it for what feels like hours, but the music doesn't resolve. It's not designed to. There's no big finish, no triumphant chord. The monks repeat the same patterns over and over until you lose track of which voice is leading. This is not a performance. It's a ritual, and you're inside it now. A note still held by the first monk wavers slightly. He adjusts his breath with a technique called circular breathing, learned from long hours of practice. They train to hold eternity in their lungs. At one point, you think you hear the note change, but it hasn't. You're just hearing overtones, the ghostly vibrations that ring above a pitch. It's your ears doing math they weren't trained for. You begin to understand why some believe this kind of music brought them closer to God. Not through beauty, but through endurance. In the dim alcove of the chapel, a fourth voice rises. This one is dissonant, almost jarring, but it's carefully placed on purpose. The tension is thrilling because the resolution might come, or it might not. Historians still argue whether this was meant to mimic divine mystery, or if composers just really enjoyed messing with listeners. You lie back on the cold flagstone floor. The sound vibrates in your teeth. One of the monks begins chanting Sein Namen without name. It means the piece has no title, no attribution. It just is. Meant to exist, not to be owned. This might be a canon per tonos, a type of piece that transposes upward each time it repeats. Theoretically, it never ends. You could sing it forever, climbing by small intervals until you cycle through every possible pitch and return, exhausted, to where you started. Like a musical treadmill from the 1300s. A fringe theory claims some monastic communities actually attempted this performed canons as acts of devotion, singing for days without full stops. Not continuously, of course, but enough that you'd question your sanity or your pitch. You remember earlier, the bagpipe drone, the motet layers, the scrambled rhythms of the tavern. And now you realize it was all preparing you for this experience. This held a note, this non-ending ending. The monk walks past you, still singing, and places a parchment in your lap. On it, no words, just lines, shapes, neumes. Music without lyrics, not for the voice, for the soul. A melody you can't sing, but can somehow hear. You try to hum along. You think you succeed. Or maybe the piece hums through you. Time doesn't stop here. It folds. It crinkles at the edges like warm parchment near a fire. The more you listen, the less you hear with your ears. Something deeper takes over. Something that doesn't want resolution-only repetition. Comfort. Stasis. The monk extinguishes the candle, but the music doesn't fade. Because it was never just sound. It was structured, belief, intention. It was a note that never needed to end. The note still lingers, somewhere deep inside your bones. You're back in your own space now, though it's hard to say when the shift happened. Maybe the abbey faded away while you blinked. Maybe it never existed at all, just a dream woven from chant and candlelight. Either way, you're here, and the quiet feels softer than silence. Let your body settle now, as if that one endless note has finally let you go. Sink gently into the comfort of stillness. Your breath slows. Your thoughts stretch out. You're safe. No motets, no rebecks, no bagpipes hiding under your bed. Let the images from tonight drift like mist monks and minstrels, nobles and noise, music both maddening and miraculous. There's no need to understand it all. Some things, like a drone that won't end, are meant to be felt, not solved. Inhale and remember the candlelight. Exhale and let go of the tritone. That dissonance is far behind you now. If your ears still buzz, let them. It's only memory humming. Not a song you need to chase, just one to sleep beside. The medieval world was full of sharp angles and soft voices. Strange rhythms and strange beliefs, but you survived it. Maybe even learned its lullaby. And now you rest. You rest. You rest